You all here, and welcome to part 2 of incorporating native plants into your garden. I'm Carolyn Hillel, and I'm here on behalf of our host, Palisades Village, and its events committee. I'm joined by our executive director, Erica Blanton. Erica, you want to wave? And by our associate director, Anne Oran. Anne, thank you. And so everybody, you are in for a real treat today. It's my pleasure to welcome back Master Gardener and World Bank retiree, Janet Entwistle. Janet gave a marvelous part 1. And so we just had to have her back for a second go at this. Last November, she spoke to us about the many benefits of introducing native plants into our gardens, thereby creating beautiful, bountiful, biodiverse havens for pollinators like bees, and butterflies, and birds, and other endangered species, and also enhancing our own urban gardening experience. So this time she's going to review some of those highlights, tell us about some of the best practices for spring cleanup. That's probably something we're going to have to ask her about, because that's something I need to know an awful lot more about. How to select native plants for your own garden's needs and where to buy them. Janet herself is slowly converting her own garden to more native plants, and she's tweaking her gardening practices to promote biodiversity. By sharing what she knows, she's also helping us contribute to a healthier, happier planet. One gardener and one garden at a time. We are so fortunate to benefit from her vast experience today. So let's welcome our good friend with the green thumb, Janet Entwistle.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see some of those from the November presentation again, and also to meet others, even if virtually. I am so excited to be here to share with you more ideas on creating not just a beautiful garden, but a beautiful garden that contributes to a healthy local ecosystem. And I'm excited to continue to work together with you to help retain Washington, D.C.'s unique biodiversity. In November, we talked about the importance of biodiversity and the risk of extinction that so many species face. And we talked about why it is now considered so critical that private homeowners play a role as more and more land is concentrated in private hands. Choosing to plant native plants in our gardens and changing gardening practices, such as leaving the fallen leaves, are both critical to protecting biodiversity. You may remember the main message from the November presentation: plant choice matters. And I think with that, I'm going to share my screen and put up the presentation for today. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
That looks great, Janet.
Wonderful. As the title of today's presentation suggests, I'll now focus on how those that have decided to encourage a healthy local ecosystem in their gardens can get started. And before getting started, a reminder that I want to learn from you today as well. There is a growing movement toward planting more native plants, and some of you may be well ahead of me. During the Q&A, I hope that you will share some of your knowledge and experience. Since I retired in June 2021, I've spent countless hours learning through classes, lectures, books, and articles, and by discovering many beautiful native plants while hiking in the Shenandoah the catectons, and even local urban trails. And I've continued to enhance my garden with more and more native plants and remove invasives. At the same time, I've learned from my friends and neighbors and would love to continue to learn from the experience of all of you. My main reference materials for today are books by Doug Tallamy, who is a professor at the University of Delaware and the de facto leader of the movement to incorporate more native plants into our home gardens. I also relied on the Mount Cuba Center Plant Finder and other native plant finders, as well as my own experience on the characteristics of different plants. Mount Cuba Center is a nonprofit botanical garden near Wilmington, Delaware, that also produces research related to native plants. For keystone plants, my source is the National Wildlife Federation. I will share with you after the presentation a Word document with references to Tallamy's books, active links to fascinating articles on native plants by others that I've read recently, and there have been more and more since November, and also links to other resources you may find helpful. And I am available again, even after the presentation, for any follow-up questions. The more that you ask me, the more I will have an opportunity to learn. So please don't be shy with your questions. And if I don't know, I can follow up with you afterwards. Perhaps you have already reduced the size of your lawn to make room for native plants, or are planning to do so this spring. Maybe you spent some of this winter removing invasives and now want to fill the empty spaces with natives. Maybe you would like to plant native plants where you usually plant annuals, or replace ornamental plants that have died with natives. You could have a bare patch where nothing else seems to grow, or like me, all of the above. Plus, I removed a treehouse and want to fill a bare patch under the tree to create a safe landing for caterpillars that fall down in the spring. Over the winter, I have removed much of the invasive vinca minor in my backyard and a lot of the invasive forsythia, tiger lily, and liriope. And therefore, I have freed up lots of space for more native plants. And since we were all busy, I hope that the ideas we discussed today can help you get started. Maybe you will be able to move, buy and plant native plants to the top of your to-do list without having to first invest in a lot of research into what and where to buy. And I hope things can start growing more in your garden, not just your to-do list. Today's presentation has 4 sections. We will first talk a little bit about defining goals. This will include getting technical so that you are better prepared when you shop for plants to make the choices that align with your goals. We'll spend the bulk of the presentation letting you peek at some of the choices that I made for my own garden and why I made them. Then we'll identify where to buy native plants. And finally, we'll discuss where to get help. When defining goals for your garden, you may want to consider environmental conditions, keystone plants for this area, whether you prefer straight species or cultivars or hybrids. Little hint, probably not. And any special interests that you have. For example, like attracting hummingbirds. Let's discuss each of these one by one. Environmental conditions important to consider are the amount of sunlight that the area that you're getting, that you are planting gets, the presence of mammals, and soil conditions. Do you have full sun, partial shade, or shade? Are your plants accessible to deer or rabbits? Keeping in mind that some native plants are deer and rabbit resistant, but when hungry, deer and rabbits could eat anything, so barriers may be necessary if your garden is not fenced. And are there areas of your garden that are naturally wet or moist, for example, near a stream, and others that are dry? Have you taken your soil to a testing center to determine the pH? If you plant native plants in the conditions they are adapted to, this could reduce substantially the need to water them once they are established. So this is where we want to get a little technical so that we are all prepared to make the choices that are right for us. We'll go over what is a keystone plant and identify some of them in the mid-Atlantic where we live. We'll discuss the advantages of planting straight species versus cultivars or hybrids. And we'll discuss plant names so that when you are at the garden center, you will know how to identify which plant is a straight species, which is a cultivar, and which is a hybrid. Keystone plants are native plants critical to the food web and necessary for many wildlife species to complete their life cycle. And just a reminder, when I refer to wildlife, I am not referring to deer, rabbits, and other mammals that do not face extinction risk. I am referring to insects, mainly bees, butterflies, caterpillars, and also to birds, given how critical they are to a healthy local ecosystem and even to our own survival. If we remove keystone plants, the diversity and abundance of many essential insect species, which 96% of terrestrial birds rely on for food sources, will be diminished. The ecosystem will collapse in a similar way that the removal of the keystone in an ancient Roman arch will trigger its demise. Doug Tallamy and his team at the University of Delaware have identified that 14% of native plants, the keystones, support 90% of butterfly and moth species. The research horticulturist Jared Fowler has shown that 15 to 60% of North American native bee species are pollen specialists who only eat pollen from 40% of native plants, the keystones. So if you'd like to provide a nice environment for caterpillars that will feed hungry birds or build cocundos and turn into beautiful butterflies, planting keystone plants may become a priority for you. Keystones can be canopy trees, understory trees, shrubs, or perennials, which are all essential garden layers to provide beauty and also nourishment and cover for birds and insects. You can get the full list on the National Wildlife Federation website. Later in the presentation, when we take a glimpse at the plants in my garden, the slides indicate which featured native plants are keystones. These on this slide are some of the keystone canopy trees. Doug Tallamy refers to the oak tree as the mighty oak, as it is the keystone plant with the largest number of caterpillar species that use it as a host plant, 436 to be exact. Sugar maple, 238 caterpillar species, black cherry, 340, and river birch, 284. All of these trees are critical to large numbers of caterpillars. So if you did nothing this year except plant one of the keystone native trees, you've already done a lot to contribute to biodiversity in your yard. Some keystone understory trees and shrubs are serviceberry. 92 caterpillars use it as a host plant. Dogwood, 98. Northern highbush blueberry, 217. And northern bayberry, 103. Some keystone perennials are woodland sunflower. 66 caterpillars use it as a host plant. Goldenrod, 104. Aster, 100. And black-eyed Susan, 20. Now let's talk about the difference between a straight species, a cultivar, and a hybrid. Straight species occur naturally and thus offer the greatest biodiversity and biggest ecological impact. Cultivars are selected for a specific trait, for example, to develop white mildew resistant plants, or smaller, more compact plants, or redder leaves in the fall. They therefore have less genetic diversity. They also potentially have some loss of ecological impact. Scientists are studying this now, and so far at Mount Cuba Center, they found no loss of ecological impact for example, a cultivar bred to be shorter. They did find that changing the color of leaves did have ecological impact, with fewer insects finding the new color of leaves. A hybrid is the intentional breeding of two different plant species to create a new plant without genetic diversity. Some hybrids are sterile. They are not the best choice for a pollinator garden. When you go to the plant store, the way to be able to tell whether the plant that you are considering to purchase is a straight species or a cultivar or a hybrid is through the plant labeling, which usually includes the common name, the Latin name, and also the hybrid or cultivar name when relevant. A straight species will most often have the common name and then the genus and the species written beside it in italics with the first word capitalized. For example, the straight species I have listed here are butterfly weed, also known as Asclepias tuberosa, or black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta. A hybrid will have the common name and the genus, again written in italics, as well as the hybrid name in single quotation marks. It won't have the species after the genus since it is a cross between two species. For example, I've shown one example here, black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia, American Gold Rush. I won't be putting any of that in my garden. Finally, a cultivar will most often have the common name and the genus and the species, again written in italics with the first word capitalized, along with the cultivar name in single quotation marks. And I have three examples here. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta, Cherokee Sunset, Goldenrod, Solidago rugosa, fireworks, which I have in my garden, you will see, and New England aster, Symphyiotrichum novae anglae, purple dome. Again, I have that in my garden, so you'll hear about both of those later in the presentation. The Latin name is also useful to truly identify any plant. For example, common names can refer to an Asian species or a native species, or even Latin species. How do we know which one is which? Through the Latin name. For example, the Chinese French tree's Latin name is Chionathus retusus, and the American French tree is Chionathus virginicus. So if you really want to know what you're planting, it's always a good idea to double check not just the common name, but the Latin name as well. It can be easy to get confused with so many choices. Besides perhaps preferring keystone plants or straight species, an interest in layering to attract wildlife and creating a pleasing look, you may also have a preference for host plants for certain butterflies to attract bees or hummingbirds. You may want blossoms year-round so that you can enjoy them, but also to provide pollen or nectar to bees and butterflies. You may like a tidy look or a wild look, or plants that are easiest to care for. This brings us to the second and main section of the presentation. A glimpse at my yard. Let's talk now about which native plants I've planted in my garden and why I love them. Maybe some of these will be appropriate for the environmental conditions where you want to plant. And maybe some of the reasons that I planted them will resonate with you. If so, these plants might be a good place for you to start developing your own native plant garden. I have featured plants from the understory layer, shrubs, and perennials that I have planted in the last few years. My garden also has large keystone canopy trees, oak, hickory, and black cherry, though I have not featured these today. If you don't have keystone canopy trees, you may also consider planting one this year. If your garden is smallish, you may want to look at the dwarf chestnut oak recommended by Doug Tallamy, which grows 12 to 25 feet and produces acorns in just 3 to 5 years. Let's get started now on looking in depth at a few beautiful native plants. Virginia bluebells, who does not love them? This is one of my absolute favorites. Bottom line, early spring color. If you would like to see them en masse, go to Riverbend Park near Great Falls, Virginia in late March or early April to see them and other spring ephemerals under the forest canopy and by the river. They like full sun in early spring and then shade as the forest canopy fills in. Blooms will fade first and then the foliage by the end of May, just like other spring ephemerals. The top smaller picture was taken in my garden. This one, March 20th last year. This shows that the early buds are pink. The bottom picture is showing full bloom on March 27th in Riverbend Park last year. Green and gold. I was looking for an evergreen ground cover that I could use to start replacing the Vinca minor in my garden. I fell in love with green and gold due to its beautiful yellow flowers and semi-evergreen leaves that were evergreen this year due to the mild winter. In spite of a colony of rabbits overtaking my neighborhood and my yard, they have not touched the green and gold. This picture is from a friend's garden in Rappahannock County last April. Dogwood. This has been my favorite tree since I was a little girl growing up in Maryland. In art class in primary school, I remember going outside to sketch the dogwoods. And as Virginia's state tree and state flower, it is a must-have in any local garden. It is a beautiful addition to the understory layer as it provides year-round beauty and nourishment for wildlife. A newly planted sapling can take some time to get established. I took this picture last April, the first year I had a full bloom since planting the tree in 2016. Last year, I lost an heirloom oak tree that was very near my house. I still have other oak trees in my yard, and rather than plant another oak tree, I opted to replace it with this beautiful, unique understory tree, which provides year-round interest. The picture is not my own, as mine is just a small sapling. I can't wait until I can take my own picture of a blooming fringe tree in my yard. Inkberry. This is a beautiful evergreen shrub that gets beautiful small white flowers in the spring. If you also plant a male, the female will get small blackberries later in the fall. This picture is from a friend's garden last May. Another friend and I loved it so much that we both planted one last spring. I also planted a male in the fall, and I'm hoping for some beautiful blossoms and berries to feed the birds later in the fall and winter. I plan to add another female this spring. This is the first cultivar I'm showing today. It is bred to be more compact. Shamrock cultivars are only female. The male that I planted is a straight species. I came upon this goat's rue in the Shenandoah on a hike last June and was immediately stunned by its vibrant pink color and took a photograph. Acidic dry soil best describes most of my garden. I found it in a local native plant seller and planted it last fall, and I'm looking forward to see how it does. Wild columbine. This is an absolutely stunning flower that is easy to grow and attracts hummingbirds, which is a priority for me. This is a stock photo because I did not get a good photo yet of the one I planted in my garden 2 years ago. I'm going to do my best to get one this year with a hummingbird in it. Northern high bush blueberry. When I bought my house 30 years ago, there were already high bush blueberry bushes in my garden. Only one of those originals is left now and is over 7 feet tall. And I have now planted more, and I always compete with the birds for their delicious fruit. Because rabbits love to eat the foliage, I have put netting around the young plants. This picture was taken last June on a hike in the Shenandoah. Butterfly weed. This is a must-have for a pollinator garden and the only plant that the larvae of the monarch butterfly will eat. And it is stunning and tolerates some drought. The bottom left picture was taken by a friend last July in her garden. Purple coneflower. This has a long blooming period, pleasing flower lovers like me, as well as the many bees, butterflies, and birds that use it for nourishment. It's very easy to grow. The photo was taken in a friend's garden last September. Scarlet bee balm. This is my all-time favorite. It is a hummingbird, butterfly, and bee magnet, and it is stunning. It requires maintenance to keep it from taking over the garden, as it can spread from year to year. So it is not for the faint of heart, but the efforts are well worth it, as it does have these extremely unique large blossoms. It is also highly susceptible to powdery mildew, which reduces its beauty, but will not kill it. I want to try planting this year the Garden View Scarlet Bee Balm that Mount Cuba Center research shows is most consistently mildew resistant. But I recommend it with mildew or without. It is stunning. Along with Scarlet Bee Balm, Cardinal Flower is a top performer for attracting hummingbirds. It has a reputation for being short-lived, but also self-seeds. Just in case, I already bought new seedlings so that I can enjoy multitudes of hummingbirds again this summer. This picture was taken in my garden last July 21st. A friend gifted me this garden phlox 2 years ago, and I've enjoyed the constant summer presence of swallowtail butterflies drinking its nectar. It is very easy to care for, and its bright pink flowers are beautiful and long-lasting. It also attracts hummingbirds. Jenna is a powdery mildew-resistant cultivar that's recommended by the Mount Cuba Center. Joe pieweed. The cultivar Baby Joe is bred to be more compact, but as you can see, is still quite tall. It is a butterfly and bee magnet and a beautiful addition to a pollinator garden. I planted mine last fall, so have not yet seen the blooms in my garden. This is from the pollinator garden outside of Politics and Prose on Connecticut Avenue, taken the end of August last year. Black-eyed Susan, as we said earlier, is an important keystone plant. It is also the Maryland state flower and another favorite from my childhood. I can't imagine my summer garden without it. The goldfinches love it, and they also love the sunflower that the goldfinch in the picture is resting on. This photo was taken in my garden last July. Whitewood aster. This provides early fall blossoms just when some summer blossoms are starting to fade. I planted some last fall, so I'm looking forward to having blossoms in my garden for the first time this fall. First, I will need to find a way to protect it from rabbits, probably more netting. This photo was taken at a friend's house last September. New England aster is a keystone plant, which I planted last spring, having bought it when a small park in Tacoma Park was dividing and selling excess perennials for only $5 each. It provides beautiful color, fall color, and nectar for pollinators, but it is a challenge also to shield from the rabbits. The pictures were taken last September in my garden. Goldenrod, also, as we said, is an important keystone and fall nectar source for pollinators. This compact cultivar is gorgeous, fireworks. I took the photo in a friend's garden last September before she divided and gifted me some for my own garden. I have had trouble protecting the younger shoots from rabbits, but they left it alone as it matured. Goldenrod should not be confused with ragweed, which causes hay fever. Goldenrod does not cause hay fever. I fell in love with winterberry when a friend invited me to Ladue Gardens in Moncton, Maryland last October, where the winterberry shrubs already had berries. I pulled up my patch of invasive forsythia and replaced it with native winterberry, 2 females which will produce berries and 1 male needed for cross-pollination. I am hoping for berries next winter to provide color and attract birds to my garden, but may have to wait longer to give the plants a chance to get established. Now that you had a glimpse of the beautiful native plants in my garden that provide color and interest and nectar and pollen year-round, perhaps you would like to buy some of them for your garden. But where can we buy native plants? We will now talk about some of the upcoming native plant sales that feature a variety of vendors from the area. There are more than what I'm going to feature today. This is just a selection. The website listed here, plantnovanatives.org, will have all the native plant sales in Northern Virginia. I'm also going to feature today some local native plant nurseries that you can visit and some reliable online sources. The reason that I am recommending native plant sellers is because specialist native plant vendors never use pesticides that could harm the pollinators that you are attracting. If you shop at nurseries that feature ornamentals as well as native plants, you may want to ask about the use of pesticides to be sure of what you are buying. So we can go through these next slides quickly. The main thing is to get the date on your calendar. And I think we're going to, like last time, send this presentation out afterwards. So don't think you need to write hurriedly the date. We'll get this out to you, I think, as soon as possible. The first one I'm featuring is the Northern Alexandria Native Plant Sale. It will be Saturday, April 29th. I have been to this native plant sale. It has a lot of excellent vendors, including from the area and including ones where I've actually been to the local seller. I recommend it highly. The other thing is on the website, Scott Knudsen, who maintains it, he also lists other native plant sales in the area. So it's also a good resource for others. Another one coming up is Loudon Wildlife Conservancy, Saturday, April 22nd. Friends of the National Arboretum Native Plant Sale. And by the way, the same day, Saturday, March 25th, there is a Native Plant Symposium. I've already registered for it. I think it's going to be from 8:30 to 3 o'clock, something like that day. And I'm very excited about that opportunity. Friends of Riverbend Park Native Plant Sale. While you're going there to look at the spring ephemerals, the Virginia bluebells and others, on Saturday, April 8th, you can also buy some of your own Virginia bluebells. And you can buy others online from Wednesday, February 1st to Saturday, April 1st. If you have any interest, go ahead and look right away because some of the plants are already sold out. And then I came across this one I thought was interesting, Fairfax County Native Seedling Sale. This year, they're selling a package of 6 native trees, small saplings: American elderberry, black chokeberry, eastern redbud, Allegheny chinquapin, American persimmon, gray dogwood. And maybe if you don't have room in your own garden for all of those varieties, you'll want to go in with your neighbors on that. This is a list of local native plant sellers that I've had good experience with. You can find others in the links here. Hill House Farm and Nursery is the first native plant seller I ever went to. It's by appointment only, but an appointment's easy to make. You just send an email. Janet Davis usually answers her emails the same day or the next day. Just let her know when you'd like to come by and she'll probably confirm that it's okay. Bonatera has a lot of plugs, and I did see them at the Northern Virginia native plant sale that I featured earlier. This is a great way to get into native plants because you can buy a plug. I believe it's for $4 each. And so it's a great way to introduce a lot of species to your yard and try out different things and see how they work. The Pollination and Izzle are good online retailers known for quality and not using pesticides. But again, if you are interested in using those as a source for the plants in your garden, I strongly urge you to go online now because, again, some of the inventory for the spring is already sold out. It's important to get in early. By the way, there's always next fall and there's always next spring if you don't find what you want online. This brings us to the last section of the presentation. Where can you get help? You can get help from River Smart Home Program. It's run by the DC Department of Energy and the Environment. River Smart Homes is a district-wide program offering incentives to homeowners to reduce stormwater runoff from their properties. And planting native plants does that because native plants tend to have deeper roots that absorb more water than a lot of the foreign ornamentals that we have traditionally been putting in our gardens. Those that register through the program can receive a stormwater audit to determine their eligibility for financial and technical assistance to install one or more of the following features: rain barrels, shade trees, rain gardens, which need to be planted with native plants, bayscaping, which is basically native plant planting, permeable pavers, and revegetation. I don't yet have experience in getting a stormwater audit for my property, but that is not for want of trying. I was hoping that I would be able to talk to you today about the experience. Instead, on May 13th last year, I applied to the program. On June 14th, I received confirmation that I am on the wait list with a current wait time of about 6 months. On January 18th this year, I received notice that a River Smart environmental protection specialist will reach out to me soon. On January 19th, the next day, a River Smart environmental protection specialist called me and asked if I would be available the next day for the assessment on January 20th. I was unfortunately not available at such short notice. On February 22nd, I received another notice that a River Smart environmental protection specialist will reach out to me within 1 to 3 months. If you would like to get started right away, like I did, and not wait for the stormwater assessment, you can do the work yourself or with a contractor and apply for a River Smart rebate. Rebates are available to residents who install rain barrels, shade trees, rain gardens, and permeable pavers on their own. You do not need to wait for a stormwater audit to install your own green features for a rebate, but do look at the website and be sure to follow the instructions to make sure that that what you are installing meets the requirements for a rebate. And here is the service provider referral list maintained by the RiverSmart program and available on their website. RiverSmart is not recommending any one contractor and recommends that you get multiple quotes before proceeding with the work. I, by the way, don't have experience with any of these contractors, but I thought it was a great resource to put up, given that it is on the RiverSmart website. In my experience with rebates through the RiverSmart Home program, I am very happy to report, has been very positive. One word of caution. When I applied for the rain barrel rebate, the online form was supposed to have a drop-down menu, and I was supposed to choose the rain barrel I purchased from that menu. Unfortunately, there was no drop-down menu, and I was not able to submit the form online. I emailed the program and received a response the next day that I could submit a paper form. My advice, don't give up easily. This is a great program and worth taking advantage of. When I applied for the rebate for the American Fringe Tree, the process with KC Trees was simple with no glitches. And I received an email from them to please spread the word about how easy the process was to basically get a free shade tree for my yard. So please, please do take advantage of that program. You can see from the numbers here, the rain barrel I installed basically will pay for itself in the first year. And it'll actually pay more than what you see here because I am able to use the water stored in that rain barrel to water my garden, further cutting down on the bill. But if you install a rain barrel, you not only get the $100 rebate, but you get discounts on your water bill. You don't have to pay as much of the Clean Rivers Impervious Area charge. You don't have to pay as much of the government stormwater fee. So these are great programs, and I do hope that they are helpful to you. And if all else fails, this could be another way to attract hummingbirds to your garden. So once again, my parting words: plant choice matters. Healthy local ecosystems add up to a healthy planet. Thank you. Enjoy creating your wildlife paradise. And please let me know if you have any questions or comments or experience that you would like to share with all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janet. That was wonderful. I'm inspired. Carolyn, I know you had a burning question. I don't hear her though.
You're muted, Carolyn.
Does anyone else have a burning question?
I've got a question about the Monardas, because you were talking about the scarlet type, and I unfortunately bought bergamot, which is the pale pink type of Monarda. I guess that's very, very native, but it just went crazy. And I thought I was getting some of the scarlet, but I didn't end up getting any of that. Is there, how would I know? I guess I have to look at all the names and such to know the difference.
To know the difference, you'll need to look at the Latin name. Okay. So the one that you got sounds like the straight species, which is basically the one you'll find, growing along the side of the road or in some wild area. And it is certainly beautiful and stunning as well. But the scarlet vivon is the one that I prefer to have in my garden, and you will know it by looking at the Latin name.
And does the pale pink thing have the same properties as far as attracting wildlife as the scarlet?
Yes.
Okay.
Straight species will have the same properties. If it's a cultivar, like Garden View, the one that I remarked has less problems with powdery mildew, then it could potentially have less ecological impact. But it also could potentially be about the same. This is something we need to listen to the scientists over the next few years as more research comes out. So I don't think you're going to be losing anything by putting in the scarlet one. And maybe you'll get a few more hummingbirds.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Thank you.
I have a question. Are there any flowering native plants that flower all summer or most of the summer?
Yes, so some of the longer blooms from the species that I featured today would be purple coneflower, black-eyed Susan, phlox. In my experience in my garden, frankly, has been the longest. So many of those that start blooming in summer will continue into really early to mid-fall.
Excellent, thank you. What about?
I have just a quick, oh, go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, go ahead, please.
All right, yeah, I just want to say thank you. That was a great presentation, much appreciated. And I just wanted to confirm, will we get a copy? So we'll have it of your PowerPoint, so we'll have the list of plants and stuff.
And please confirm, but I believe last time, Anne, you sent it out to everyone, and I expect that will be possible again. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes.
Okay, great, great.
No problem. And you can also watch the recording again if you want.
Ah, great. Thank you. Thank you again.
And you'll also get that word list with active links that I hope can help you.
Will you say something about pH and its importance? I understand so little of that, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Yes, so the good news on that, first of all, is that most of the plants that I featured in the presentation are mostly very adaptable to various pHs. Where they prefer either acid or alkaline, I did note that in the slide. But really the large majority will grow in any pH soil. Most people probably don't even know the pH of the soil they have. We might know, for example, that the azaleas we're growing, they need an acidic soil. And I think a lot of us are going to have quite acidic soil that are here in the Washington area. So if you want to get your soil tested and you're just not sure what it is, because you've seen some of these plants up here that say they prefer acidic and you want to see if you have acidic soil, you can take your soil to the University of District Columbia, has a soil testing lab. And in this Word document that we're going to send to you afterwards, I've actually listed the website for the soil testing lab. The University of Maryland also recommends certain soil testing labs. And so I'm also going to have those listed. And then most Virginia counties, you can also get your soil tested through there.
It's wonderful to think of the University of the District of Columbia as being an agricultural center.
Yeah.
The University of District Columbia is the sponsor of the Master Gardener class that's offered here in the District of Columbia. I'm a Master Gardener, not in DC, but in Rappahannock County, Fauquier and Rappahannock County, where I got my certification. But anyone that's interested in becoming a Master Gardener, the program here in the DC, I think, is more accessible now. There's new management, and there are 2 classes a year. And I encourage you strongly to look into it. I think it's a very good program.
I have a question about your recommendations for spring cleanup. How to do it in a way that doesn't undo all the good we've done by leaving our leaves on the ground and not cutting back some of last year's plantings.
Thank you, Carolyn. I was hoping that you would ask that question. Just yesterday, in the beautiful, beautiful spring weather, I decided to go out and do a little bit of the spring cleanup. So one thing, for those of us that left the leaves last year and also left our perennial stems, it's now time to go out and cut some of those perennial stems. And you want to do it in, say, 8 inches from the ground, 12 inches from the ground, 24 inches from the ground, so different bees can find them. And when you find perennial stems, for example, that are hollow, these are perfect nesting sites for bees. So you really want to take special care with them on the different heights and to leave them standing. The new growth from the spring will quickly overtake, and so you won't see them for that much longer. But it is time that you can now start cleaning them up a little bit, and so that the bees can find those hollowed out stems. In terms of leaving the leaves, the recommendation is to leave them forever. So you might want to do that if you place them in a spot behind your garage that isn't visible to everyone else, or you've been able to rake them underneath some bushes. The bushes will soon fill in, right? And so then you won't be able to see the ground. But there are some areas that you're probably going to want to pick the leaves up from. And the recommendation from the Xerces Society is to wait as long as possible, because you don't want to lift those leaves up and then jeopardize all the nice insects that have been hibernating there over the winter. So they recommend that if you were going to do it, you only do it in late spring. I guess another alternative would be, if you were going to do it, try and then move them to those areas where you can leave them, rather than putting them in the trash to be disposed of, right? Because then you're still preserving as much of that insect life as possible.
Great. I have a quick question. Is that true for pine needles also? Pine trees that drop their needles?
Absolutely. Yep. And these can be a beautiful mulch, right? I'm frankly getting used to the deciduous leaves also being a beautiful mulch. I was looking out in my garden today with the flowers and the leaves and the beds, and I'm liking the look now. I guess I've been converted completely, but I think pine needles make a really stunning mulch. Yeah.
Is there any safe weed removal techniques for your garden? I'm thinking about pathways, along paths especially. Is there any way to do it that isn't going to harm the environment or your garden?
Yes. So what Doug Tallamy recommends, if you've got invasive plants in your yard, the threat to biodiversity is so great that using a bit of, for example, Roundup, that's very concentrated and very carefully applied, is actually a good thing. And so, for example, if you're getting rid of a Japanese barberry or forsythia, you can try and dig up all the roots that you can, or you can just cut it off at ground level, and then you can dab some of the Roundup on the leaf so it doesn't go into the surrounding area. The roots then absorb it all the way down to the bottom and kills the plants. So the recommendation is not to spray, because that can go into the surrounding air and also kind of be dispersed much more, but to be very deliberate in dabbing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have a question. What about those of us who have container gardens? Is there a way that we can maximize what little we have in containers to provide a feast for the bees and the birds?
Absolutely. And that is actually something I want to work on more myself. When I send you this Word document, it's going to have a link to an article on the best native plants for container gardens. So please take a look at that. And really, all of these plants you can put in a container garden. A friend of mine grew butterfly weed last year in the containers on her patio. Absolutely beautiful. And I also planted butterfly weed and black-eyed Susans in the containers my son has on the patio of his condo. Also absolutely beautiful last year. So I do encourage you to take the same advice for the containers, but also take a look at the article that I'm sending you for some other tips.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. Who else has questions? I know there are questions out there.
I have one question for Janet. In terms of these plants, can you start them by seed, or should you go to the store and buy little ones?
So some of them are easier to start by seed than others. Some of them need, in fact, probably most of them need a period of cold before they will germinate. One that I have very successfully started by seed is butterfly weed. You can collect the seeds, put them in the refrigerator for the winter, or even plant them outside in a pot for the winter so they get that frozen period. And they came out beautifully last year. I got a lot of beautiful butterfly weed plants. I also planted my scarlet bee balm myself from seed, and it did not flower. I planted it in the winter and it did not flower the first year. It flowered the second year. Now, a really even more successful strategy, if you didn't want to get one of the smaller plants, is to plant the roots. And so a lot of these mail order places, and maybe even some of the native plant sellers, you can buy just roots, and they're super easy to send through the mail. And I had great success in planting the roots of scarlet bee balm. In fact, the one that I featured here in the presentation was planted from roots, and I planted them in the fall, and the scarlet bee balm came up last spring and flowered beautifully the first year. So roots are kind of a much faster root. If you plant by seed, you're probably going to have to wait for a year. And a lot of native plants, maybe even take 1 or 2 years to really get, or sometimes maybe even 3 years to get through their full potential.
Thank you.
I've never seen any type of sales just for roots. I'm surprised at that, because I know that you can buy bare root plants, but I've never heard of just buying the roots. It's do you find that in the stores that you walk into or online?
I've done it online. I bought them online that way.
Okay. Interesting.
But last year I wanted to buy some bloodwort, and that's one of the spring ephemerals. and it had already gone underground and there were only the roots. So at the garden center, they brought me just the pot, right? And I was newer to this and I was a bit skeptical. And in the end, they recommended another one to me. But they did say, yeah, take this and plant it. It will be fine. So I think at some of the local native plant sellers too, you'll get them that way. Those were roots in a pot, by the way, whereas these bare roots I've gotten through online sellers.
I have a question about mulch. You mentioned just the natural mulch, either pine or leaves. What about mulch that you get at garden centers and put down on the bare ground? Are you suggesting that maybe we not use mulch that way?
Yeah, well, I've done some reading on this, and the recommendation is that the heavy bark mulch can be more difficult for the insects to come through. I was at a talk by Doug Tallamy actually on Sunday, and you don't want also a lot of erosion, right? And so mulch will prevent erosion. I think that the main thing you want for mulch, even besides leaves, pine leaves or the deciduous leaves, what you really want is a live mulch. And so this ground cover layer, this perennial layer, if you plant thickly, if you plant a lot, then that actually becomes the mulch for the yard. And so instead of, for example, just putting a lot of mulch under trees, which becomes kind of a dead space with no insect life, the recommendation is to plant some of the ground covers there. The one I featured today is green and gold because I'm in love with it. But there are also others like wild ginger, and there's native pachysandra, not the Asian pachysandra that's in a lot of our garden centers, but there's a native pachysandra. So these become sort of a living mulch, and this is what the scientists are recommending the most.
Really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciated your whole presentation.
Thank you.
One more quick question. You mentioned deer and rabbits. Any experience with moles?
Moles, fortunately not. I have enough to deal with the bunnies that have overtaken my yard. And I don't have experience with moles. And so I think I will not comment on that. And I don't have any deer in my backyard because it's fenced off, but I do have deer in the front yard. But I've had good luck keeping the deer at bay with the plants that I have chosen. They do tend to like the younger shoots. And so, for example, if you plant black-eyed Susans and the deer come and eat them, don't despair. Try to protect them when they're very young. And by the time they grow a little bit, they develop this fuzziness on their leaves, and the deer don't like to eat that. And you'll probably have better luck if you can just get them through the small stage. And the netting works really well. The netting that I've been putting around the blueberries, for example, and some others.
Are there any other questions out there?
I have one last quick question. Are you aware of any online garden clubs for native plants? Is there such a thing?
There are a lot, yes. And I have listed some of them. There's the Virginia Native Plant Society. So because I got my Master Gardener in Virginia, and this is the society that I belong to and use as a resource. But there are similar societies in Maryland and other states as well. I just picked up a brochure at Doug Tallamy's talk the other day on wild ones. I actually don't know what that is yet, but I'm going to I'm going to look at that brochure and maybe include that also in the word list. I've also included the Virginia Native Plant Society in the Word document that I'll be sending out afterwards. There's the Audubon Society. There's so many different resources. And I also recommend that you go to Ladue Gardens in Moncton, Maryland. There is a beautiful butterfly house there that is with beautiful signs. You know, this is a plant that the larva of this butterfly feeds on, and it's just so well done. Mount Cuba Center, I have not been to yet, but I plan to go. It's an amazing botanical garden with continuing education courses. There's just so many different resources and so many different ways to be connected to different people. And look at the word list that I send you, because I am including some of those places there.
We might have to plan a Palisades Village outing.
Yeah.
Yes. Please invite me.
Absolutely. We would not hesitate.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of this information. And it was just, I love the way you presented it. It made it simple and the photos were gorgeous. This has been truly wonderful.
Truly
and thank you for,
yeah.
Really has been, hasn't it? And thank you everyone who came with questions and participating with us. Just as a little heads up, if you have any interest in dance, this Saturday here at the Palisades Hub, we have Dana Tysoon Burgess, who he's a neighbor and a choreographer who I've been following for 20 some years. He's the resident choreographer of the American Art Museum. And he has written a book, a memoir, and he's going to be doing a little talk about that, but he is also bringing some dancers as well to do little excerpts. So it's going to be quite a treat. It's free, 6:30 on Saturday night. You just need to register in advance because space is limited.
So everybody go forth and garden with native plants.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah, thanks again.
Especially
Much appreciated.
Erica, Carolyn, and Anne, and to all of you. And I think you have my email address on the announcement, so please do contact me if you'd like to, discuss anything else.
Thanks for
Thank
making
you.
yourself available to all of us. We appreciate this. So
I'm your neighbor. I don't live so far away, just in Chevy Chase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.